everybody who's hearing this is going to hear a lot of quiet and it's about to change. About to change. You good? What?
No, it's just a funny part of the video. What?
Nothing.
How we doing? How we doing? Picking up a bit of audio. Picking up enough to hear me, hopefully. Hello. Matt M33, thank you for being here. We're gonna get going shortly, just letting people roll in. The sound is gonna be all sorts of crazy on this one, but we probably just want to end up muting your stream sometimes. Sorry about that. I will have chat with me. This is chat on my phone. I will turn to it occasionally, try to get the noise down to address what you're saying, but you're going to see it's going to get pretty noisy. I tried to adjust the mic for that, but none of this is perfect, so I'm not going to be offended if you mute me. What I'm doing today is just taking down this bulk matrix that's on top of our Tyrannosaur. I know you can't see any bone in this image, but in the upper right corner of your screen, you'll see an image, a view from the top of this block with an overlay of what you think is going on. And toward the end, I'll take you on a tour of the block so you can see the bones that we actually have exposed. Hey, awkward cyborg, hello, hello. Now I'm going to figure out where to put you, chat. Hey, thanks for being here, Harvest Birdie. Appreciate it. Appreciate you being here. But it's going to get loud in a second. Gonna don some PPE first. It's mostly going to be shaving matrix down. So shaving this calcite cemented sandstone concretion down to the layer the Tyrannosaur is in. This is an initial rough sweep, and later on I'm going to do a detailed sweep. This is either Displeetosaurus or Gorgosaurus. It'll be a young Displeetosaurus. But it is articulated. There are some bones that are sort of redistributed, some ribs and things like that. But that upper right corner, that is pretty much what we think is happening. And I found the back and the neck, and it's doing that. So it's a pretty cool specimen. Okay.
Noise. Noise out now. You're hearing the sounds of dust extractors and air compressors, among other things. I need this dust extractor to keep me safe from silicosis, just so you know. I'm not endangering myself here. We're extracting all the dust. And yes, I do have a protective lens on my camera. So I'm sorry if that causes any aberration, but just needs to happen. Give you an idea of the workstation. All right. Once again, chat, I'm right here. I'm just not going to be able to address you live or anything like that. Not super live. I'll pick this up occasionally. You're on my phone. Silver Broadway was one of the first made. Silver was made at almost exclusively for this block, so maybe they'll made it. This thing is a monster.
curious over all that noise if you can still hear me. I'm going to boost up the mic a little bit. So if anybody can clue me into how the sound is from the you know, but appreciate it. I want to be able to communicate effectively occasionally. I have you right here. You can see. Tell me your favorite dinosaur. And what is this one? Gotta check with that's in my desktop truck. Bring that up a little closer to me. You have any questions about this specimen or anything, let me know. I don't want to be too much of a broken record, but I'm here to inform, I'm here to entertain, educate. I can see.
That's a break. That's a good question. Assuming you can hear me. Harvest Birdie asks, do you know what part of the dino you're looking towards, like the head or the ribs? Or will we not know until the bones start showing? That's a yes and a no. So I'm sitting, or I'm laying right above where the base of the tail entered the block. We've removed the tail separately. So I can be pretty sure I'm laying right on top of the sacrum right now. In fact, I have an ilium right in front of me that's not in view for you right now. I'll show you that later. That flipped over. And from the other side, we saw the traces of another ilium. So we know I'm resting over the hip. We've seen that. Where my feet are kicking over here, the legs are sticking out of the block. So we know somewhere under my thighs here are two femora leading up to the hips. Now, when I am working toward this direction, we're getting toward the center of the block, which is the thickest portion, which is where we suspect the skull is. So I'm in skull territory here. Part of why I wanted to start doing some streams here, because eventually I'm going to run into something really cool with teeth that people like to see. And just out of view, there are articulated ribs, so the chest cavity is kind of opened up. This thing, when it died, it blew up. Like, you see those videos of whales that bloat, those decomposition gases raise them to the surface and then they explode. We have this little guy here. His guts exploded out. So we have a number of belly ribs and ribs from the lower neck that burst out, as well as the furcula, among other things. We have a shoulder blade, so the arms kind of blew up, but pretty sure I'm getting towards skull territory where I am right now. Yep. Denver often calls this the best thing he's ever found and the easiest thing he ever found. Because he walked around a hill and the feet were just sticking right out. But Denver calls it Denver's Tyranno. Us preparators have been giving it the nickname Tantalus. I don't think Denver likes Tantalus very much, but we call it Tantalus because it's this never-ending slog of matrix to pull back, to move back on. It feels like you never get to the end, sort of like Tantalus trying to drink water. I think it's cool. Oh, we have robots here. That's cool. Back to the brain. And just for a little context, this is also the heaviest fossil ever airlifted, at least documented. We needed a Chinook dual-rotor helicopter to lift this out of the ground. We hiked steel beams into the field. It was a years-long operation to get this rolled in here. The concretion weighed about 10,000 pounds when it was moved in, and Deanna, Neff, and I have shaved off about 2,000 pounds of matrix ever since. But there's still quite a bit to go. And sorry about the noise. This is going to be a noisy one. I've done as much as I can in terms of modulating and stuff like that. I won't be offended if you mute it, but I do have chat.
I'll occasionally stop and look at chat. Appreciate you for being here. How we doing? Hi, Claire Burr. How you doing? Yeah, it's a bed. It's a bed for sure. Well, I'm glad the mic is working for the most part. Again, apologize about the noise, but maybe that's what you're here for. Danny is just talking about the rawness of the experience. This isn't like any of my normal streams, but maybe I'll stream on this block more often, especially when we start getting bone. Sorry, I'm staring at the microphone. That's me looking at you, Marta. Hi, thank you all for being here. Yes, Denver's Tyranno, found by Denver Fowler. I believe it was 2017 we found this, but we didn't get it back to the museum. We didn't airlift it here until 2021. And I started work on the main block in September 2022.
previous to that, I worked on the tail, which was effectively finished, except for the bit that goes into the top. And I wish I could show you some bone, but bone that we have exposed, I have it covered up so it doesn't get hit by shrapnel. That's just part of the operation. But I will switch to a different kind of camera if I do start uncovering. I may or may not today. I suspect it's going to be a lot of older matrix. The bone layer tends to be where my hand is here. It's this organic layer. So anywhere in here, right here, I have a higher chance of finding bone. So you see me stop occasionally and bring the microscope over here. So I can just take a look at things, make sure I'm not running through bone. My naked eye is pretty good, but I'm not going to trust that all the time. But I won't worry about all that. Just get work.
I have to lift myself up occasionally. Who needs oil? Not all air scribes need oil. Some of them it's just downright dangerous. But this thing needs air. Right here.
Give my hands a break for a second. Whew. Who's here? You got any questions? You want to know anything? You like food? You like salad dressing? You like dinosaurs? Which do you like better? You like the fossil fish or you like the dinosaur? At least you can see bones on the fossil fish. I wish I could show you bones. Like I said, I'm approaching the skull. Maybe we'll see a tooth today or something. Who knows? You never know. Just another day. Glad to see chat's active. I appreciate it. I appreciate you saying things. Makes me look good. That's what I need. I'm really vain. You know by my hair.
minutes or so. Gotta sit up. How we doing? Yeah. I wish I could do more about the sound, but sometimes that's what you get. Either you mute me, which I don't take offense to. Some people mute me and just watch the video for ASMR. My fish stuff is a lot more quiet, I think. I've tried to adjust settings on the mic today. I'm using a different mic. I'm using the Sony handle, Sony 3-channel handle with a microphone. I don't remember what it's called. I don't know the serial numbers or all, but I'm trying. Comfy. Yeah, it's as comfy as I can make it. But I have to keep leaning up, or else, I might develop back problems. Doing this all day, not really comfortable. It's not exactly a mattress I'm on. It's solid rock with several layers of old blankets, moving blankets, butt pads, sandbags to lean my elbows on. Yeah, eventually, I do use less scary sounding things. The smaller the air scribe, generally, not necessarily the smaller the noise, but it doesn't sound as scary. Sometimes it gets more higher pitched, but when I'm under the microscope, um, I don't have this cacophony of noise going on. But no matter what, I have to extract the dust from the air, and hand tools. Not as much hand tool work on this guy. I gotta use things that make a sound. This is Zoic T-Rex. This is like the smaller cousin of this guy. So sometimes I move in with the T-Rex. This T-Rex noise. Compared to the Bronto noise. Oh yeah, not as scary there. Noise is a thing that's hard to avoid, and my kind of noise, very hard to filter out. I can make it a little quieter for you, but I figure most of the people who are here, they know what they're here for. They know what they're in for. Yeah. Yeah, a strong neck and an aching neck. Huh. I haven't thought about it that way. It does sound like a hornet or a bee or something buzzing around. White stripes. I assume you mean these right here. Those are chisel marks. So when the chisel, this is a calcite cemented sandstone concretion. When the grains of sand are blown up by the tip here, by this tungsten carbide chisel tip of this air scribe, they refract light in such a way that it makes it look like I painted a white line into the block. If you look at the history of carving things like, you can see it on a larger scale, like Mount Rushmore or Crazy Horse not National Monument, Crazy Horse Monument. You see similar effects in the rock when the grains get broken. There's this effect that makes them look bright. But this helps me track where I've been and where I need to go, if anything.
I have you right here on chat. I'll keep an eye on your comments. I can't see them while I'm working, but I can guess some of the questions you might have. Keep it on. And again, see if I can point my index. This is what I'm working on. Where my airstrip is pointing here, where my hand is. This is Denver's Tyranno, a complete articulated opisthotonic small Tyrannosaur skeleton. If it is what we think it is, it could be the most complete large Tyrannosaur known. We've prepared a number of its elements, but still working on the back. The hips are right underneath me. The skull is probably right under my left arm. So in this territory, we're moving toward the skull. Which is why I might do this more often, because while chances are low today that I'll hit the skull, they're low every single day until you hit it. So you watch my stream, it's like watching the lottery. Maybe you'll see me as I hit something. And occasionally I do bring in this microscope here, because if I see something that is suspicious to me that might be bone, I want to take a closer look at it. It has a long distance working objective, so I'm actually using it at this height here. But I'll let you know when I bring it in. Feel like I need to stretch more. You know what? I have the same fear, but over the years, as a career preparator, you start to get a feel for things. I've been doing this 17 years, so I start to suspect when I'm going to run into things, and I also have good vision. So when I see something, take the scope out, make sure it's not a bone. There are marks of discovery. Marks of discovery happen, but we make sure that they're rare.
This is a simple Nikon microscope. So I can go from 1x to 30x magnification. That's ideal for figuring out if there's bone or not, and doing basic work. It's not ideal for what I call detailed fossil preparation. You really need a minimum of 50 magnification, which of which we have a couple scopes here. Eventually, I'll put over the block, but the scope you see me using at the shale fossil lab, my own lab, the lab that I own myself, that can do 100 magnification. Because you need that to work on fossil scales, fossil skin, all the details you can't see with your naked eye. But this scope is good enough for doing what I need it to. Yeah, I'm here to answer questions. And to stretch. I'm streaming so I can educate and entertain. I should say on the subject of scopes, in fossil preparation we use binocular stereo microscopes. So when I'm talking about this scope versus that scope, they're all of this style. We need depth perception when looking at fossils. We also need a wide objective to let as much light in as possible. So no simple or compound microscopes or anything like that. How we doing? Just joining. Thank you for being here. I guess this sort of is what it sounds like. I'm digging up a Tyrannosaur with some pneumatic tools. They can't all be in a nice soft sand. Sometimes the quarry has to come to us. And so I brought the quarry to me. And it's just taken some years to get down to it. Would people like if I zoomed in on the block a little more, zoomed into my hand a little more? Do you like it how it is? I could do either one. Your preference, not mine. Have to turn around every once in a while. How we doing today, Chad? Everything going okay? You like Tyrannosaurs? You see why I'm frustrated with Tyrannosaurs? One moment.
frustrated that it's all standing around the room, but you don't have to do everything.
How you doing, Chad? There's a dinosaur in here somewhere, I promise.
marked up my index finger too. PPE, we need anti-vibration gloves of the right size. Hearing protection. These are 3M Pro Plus. Keep the worst noise out. They let the good noise in. Yeah. Yeah. Let me know what you want to see from that. You know, when I'm working on the block, there are only so many things I can do sometimes. You know I don't have the scope camera here. That's because it really wouldn't make sense. I need to run into something. So, some people, I mean, I've done this once before. They like watching me playing through this. Like, they mute the mic and it's sort of like visually interesting. Some people don't like to mute the mic. I don't know, whatever helps me this gives me a little push to get this vlog done too, because, I go for couple week stretches where I'm not working on this. We have so many other things to do here as is, but I really want this done. I first touched this thing out in the field in 2018, and it has been a burden on my shoulders ever since. Tyranno is, I'd say he's doing well. Denver's Tyranno is. Sisyphus, the preparation has been completed. That's the Splendosaurus wilson I holotype. And I've also finished preparation on all of the Holger elements we dug up. That Holger is a new Tyrannosaur will unveil a reconstruction next year. I have one more year worrying Holger, seeing what's left, but we have most of an upper skull. We have concrete tyrant, another small Tyrannosaur currently in off-site storage, and then Denver's Tyranno, or Tantalus, as the preparators have been calling it, right here. So a lot of Tyrannosaur projects. I wish I could show you more of the bones on this guy, but when I'm working, I have them covered up, the ones that have been exposed, so they don't get damaged by shrapnel. For the same reason, I put a protective cover over my camera lens over there. I don't want my Sony lens blowing up due to sandstone shrapnel. I really need to just be suspended from the ceiling. I know it kind of looks comfortable to some people, but it's passable as cushioning. If you like this content, anyone in the chat who's new or just joining, I won't say this too much, but please follow me. That way you get notifications when I'm going live. I do have a regular schedule, but more often than not, I pop in randomly, typically in mid-afternoon to early evening. I'll do Saturday at 11 p.m. and Monday at 7 p.m. That's Mountain Time, U.S. Mountain Time. But other than that, I'll do occasional things like this. I'll randomly pop in 2 p.m. Mountain Time on a Friday. It's a lot of prep. If you subscribe, there are perks. Today's a little different, but when I'm working on fossil fish, subscribers, if they join the chat, have their initials initialed on the back of the plate with the fish, because you help me work on that. Or bird, whatever shale fossil I happen to be working on. In my other lab, so Badlands Dinosaur Museum, this is the public federal repository, and I manage the lab here. But I also have my own little skunk works where I like having fun and playing with different tools and doing the sorts of things I can't do here because I don't want to inadvertently damage federal specimens or anything like that. So, pretty fun little things we do. Thought I'd
give it a little blurb. Also, take a look at Badlands Dinosaur Museum Rome. That is linked on my page. We are trying to figure out ways to get private grants for fossil preparation, for contract fossil preparation. Previously, this has been done through federal grants, and one reason or another, we don't know if these grants are going to be available anymore for a public museum. So it's sort of a not-for-profit thing. So if you could just give that a look, see if you want to click on one of those links. You can sponsor like a day of prep. You could do a couple of hours of prep. We've even had one week of prep crowdfunded. So there are a lot of options there. That's the blurb. Yeah, that's gonna happen.
It's gonna sound a bit robotic because of all these settings to dial down the instruments in the back. But I could play around with it a little bit. Just on days like this, audio is just pretty difficult. Gotta swap out the battery on my lights. Nothing for getting a bit dark. I run my LED radius panels on batteries. So I have to plug it in. You have a great Friday too. Appreciate it. What is it? Sohu 57? Exo 57? I don't always know how to pronounce these names. But thank you for being here. I appreciate it. Thanks everyone for being here. I don't care if there are one of you, two of you, 200 of you. It makes no difference. Somebody's learning something. So please feel free to ask anything. Chat. I got the chat right here. I'm going to be working, but I look over occasionally. Here I go again.
watch myself to make sure I don't start working that right there. All still pretty new to this. I'm very thankful for all the support I've had, all the listeners. I never imagined this would be a topic that it gathered so much viewership. If you want to see more stuff like this and some curated content as well, not just re-uploaded streams, subscribe to Natural History Studio. That's Natural History Studio on YouTube. So I don't re-upload all the streams, but more interesting streams, the streams where stuff was accomplished, I'll throw up there. I might do it with this one. Take a look at the curated content. I just made a video about a Cretaceous mammal jaw curated fossil preparation. Take a look at that. I really appreciate it. And like, follow, subscribe, all of that. You know all of that. You don't need to hear from me. I should mention Denver Fowler is here too. That's right over there. It's not if you have any specific questions for him, if I gather enough questions, drag him over here. I'm sure he'd be happy to answer. Denver's the one who found this Tyrannosaur. All of Denver's Tyranno. Trying to get that so you can see better. And then Denver's telling the story of how he found this. He always likes telling that story. Sort of a build up. That's only if you want to hear it.
Still getting used to streaming from this block. It's a little awkward. Hi. Hi. Want to give me a shout out? I know chat's pretty active, but I like saying hi.
Oh, another small break. You really got to stretch doing stuff like this.
Anybody still with me? Oh no, I know some of you are still with me. Any of the OGs still with me? Anybody who has a thought, question, comment, concern, anything like that? I am here to help. I know my voice sounds a bit weird. Next fish stream, it won't be like this.
How you doing over there, John? Bye. All good.
All good. How about you?
Gotta stretch a little bit. It's very awkward.
Once more into the fray.
quick stretch. It gets very cold, very cold. That compressed air. I'm gonna wait for the compressor to kick off. Hey, how you doing? Hope you're enjoying the stream. Good. So for those of you who are just joining, working on this. So this is a complete, presumably complete, articulated opisthotonic Tyrannosaur. Opisthotonic meaning it's in the death posture, that sort of rigor mortis, that classic pose you see on television and in all the books. It is 76 million years old from the Cretaceous. That's the Campanian period. It's a small tyrannosaur, but by small tyrannosaur, it's a dinosaur. It's still pretty big. It's either a subadultus Pletosaurus or a Orgosaurus would be the taxon, or it's something totally new. Who knows? But it could be one of the most complete large tyrannosaurs known. Upwards of 90-some% complete, especially after we expose the skull. So it's a very important specimen. And what you're seeing is me working through this calcite cemented sandstone concretion that formed around the dinosaur. So there's some chemistry that goes into it. Shortly after the animal died, especially if it was gooey, still had cartilage, still had muscle attached, you had a reaction that would form calcite and iron siderite that takes those sand grains that are sort of dancing around and binds them together. So I need these heavy tools to get rid of it. And in this case, you can't just use acid preparation because it's not only calcite cementing these grains. And I would never do that anyway. I want to maintain this opisthotonic position. So you see where my hand is right now. That picture, that's what we think is going on. So that's an image of the block from above, superimposed with an illustration of what we think is happening. Some bones are out of place. They're displaced because of bloat and float. So when this thing died, it's so big, the decomposition gases built up inside of it. You've probably seen whales float to the surface of the ocean and then blow up. Well, we keep this around just for the kids to show them what happened to our dinosaur. So the gastral basket burst out with the furcula and the shoulder blades. Of course, we collected all of them. We have almost, if not all of the gastralia accounted for, and the furcula, or the wishbone, which is cool. But yeah, we had a little bloat explosion happen before this guy was picked up and dumped onto a channel or a point bar. So I'm slogging through the rock on top of it. What you can't see out of frame is an ilium sitting over here, though I don't have any bones exposed right now because they're prone to getting damaged by shrapnel. So I keep them under a plastic tarp. So if you have any questions about that, I'm here. I can see chat. And Denver Fowler is also about 20 feet away from me, and he's the guy who found him, Dr. Denver Fowler. So if you have any questions for him, I'm sure he'd answer. pop in the chat if you feel like it. If you don't, just enjoy the work. I'm sorry I kind of sound like a robot, but making the microphone work when I'm doing all of this is quite difficult.
Best of luck.
I don't know if you can see that. Let's check out all that dirt, all that matrix. It's all these chips that end up littering the lab. All these chips that end up littering the lab.
Anybody with me? Anybody got readings, questions, comments, concerns? There's a lot going on here, and I'd be happy to educate. I just don't want to be too much of a broken record. Thanks everybody for being here today. Guess I could keep going a little while longer. When it gets toward the end, let's say around 5 o'clock, well, it's 5 p.m. for me. I don't know what time it is for you. It's about 30 minutes. Somebody subscribes, maybe I'll do another. But I see a subscription as an objection. That's how I word it. Oh, don't you just love that?
wants, we could take a look at some of the bone that's already exposed. I have most of it covered, but there's a portion with the neck and the end of the tail that we could take a look at. I don't want people to get too bored of the same scribe. Hi, Clever. Nice to see you again. Maybe I'll show you some of the exposed bone. Turn it up. Okay, I think you can probably hear me now. Different microphone.
Should hear a small hum from the air scribe. Yeah, something happened to the onboard mic. Well, what I was saying, hold on. Just gonna have to deal with the compressor noise. This is the tip of the tail. This is the neck. It's hard to see the neck, but these are 3 neck vertebrae. The bottom, articulated cervical ribs, articulated cervical ribs here, so on the left and the right side. So the bottom of the neck dives down into the block, moving this way. Here we have a piece of the sacrum that moved over. We know the ilium in that way flipped up, so kind of unsurprising. And further on, over there are some partly disarticulated cervical ribs, neck ribs. So, cool little view of the specimen as prepped. And there's a little bit more in this direction that's covered, but just trying to prove that there's actually a dinosaur in there. Well, what might we do next? Yes, this is Denver's Tyranno. We can go on a little adventure. Yeah, this is the very tip of the tail right here. Here's that sacral vertebra. Another piece of the sacrum here. We knew the sacrum blew. But look at these articulated neck ribs. See, one after the other on both sides. And these are the ventral ends of the cervical centra here. So complete neck vertebrae from the base of the neck diving down into the block here. And here's where that tail enters. What you can't see well is this ilium. So this is one of the ilia. This is the cross section. And this got a bit dusted up because it's really close to where I'm working. But this is, yeah, another view of our work area with the extractor and that Nikon microscope up there. See if we can see something interesting on the other side. So these are some articulated ribs right here. 1, 2, 3, 4. And on the other side, again, 4 of those. So we're looking at the chest cavity burst open. Right here, there's 1, 2, and behind it 3 neural spines of dorsal vertebrae. So the back is running right through the middle. Let's see. I gotta lift this up a little more. You might see those 4 or 5 projections. Those are the tips of the gastralia, or the gastrobasket, sitting there. And the more you look, another one here, another one covered here, another one covered here, another one here. We account for the whole gastrobasket sticking out. Right here underneath. It's going to be hard to see, but you'll trust me that this is a articulated tibia fibula sticking out. So that's where both legs were sticking out of the block. Let's move around here. What else is going on? Yeah, it is a chunker of a rock indeed, isn't it? Indeed. Can you see me on webcam here? Well, let me see. Maybe I can get Denver over here to talk about the discovery of the rock. That might be interesting. Yeah, that was plaster, not skin. This is presumably a subadult individual, yes. Unless it's some sort of different kind of a morph, some sort of undescribed pygmy kind of a Tyrannosaur, but Occam's razor would say probably subadult Daspletosaurus or a larger subadult Gorgosaurus. Well then, give me a second here. I'm going to put you down. It'll be boring for a second.
Acquiring internet wants to know.
All right. I have him coming over here. Yeah. Oh, awesome. Oh, he's grabbing his visual aids. Grabbing his visual aids. Yeah, 10,000 pounds when we brought it in.
Where do I have to go?
Wherever you want. I'm tethered to the computer, so I can walk that over. Everybody, look. It's Dr. Denver Fowler. He found the dinosaur in the block. You remember finding it?
It's more block than dinosaur.
That's right.
Yes, I remember finding it. So this would have been 2017. Getting a nice view of my shoes.
Yes.
Yeah, 2017. So I was we'd found a macro site, so there were loads of nice little bones, and I was kneeling down on the floor, picking up all these nice bits of turtle and stuff like that. And I look up, and in the distance, I can see some leg bones, some foot bones. And we'd found a bunch of duckbills on the previous days, so I thought, some of the duckbill up there, so I'll go and look at that in a minute. So about half an hour later, I walk up there, and I see some metatarsals. This is a chunk. This is one of the pieces that was weathered out. That's why it's white. So this was lying around on the ground, and some parts were in the cliff. And then I thought, yep, there's some metatarsals. And then I spotted this. And I was like, oh yeah, right, there's a Tyrannosaur metatarsal. So,
It doesn't get any more obvious than that.
and these ones as well, these were scattered on the surface. So here are all these toe bones. So usually the bones are dark brown, so a chocolate color, but these ones have been exposed to the elements and they were just on the surface like this, so that's why they're pale. This one's really pale. So we could see in the cliff there were sets of metatarsals. So there were like scattered broken ones down here, and then two here, and then another two here. So we actually had both feet. And then on the ends of one of the metatarsals, you could see the ankle bones. And then just a little bit beyond that, we could see the bottom of the leg bone. So, thing is, you find just one leg on its own, and it's not that common, you know, but you do find it. But to find both legs together in life position, articulated, that means that you've probably got them connected up at the hips. And if they're connected up at the hips, that probably means you got the hips.
Right.
And if you got the hips, you probably got the rest of the skeleton. So we collected up everything we could see on the surface, and then we made it safe for the winter when we got a permit to come back the next year and dig around and see how much there was. And we very quickly found out it was in a concretion. But there were lots of bones that weren't in a concretion, so we collected all those and went round the concretion, and then waited, I don't know, 5 years to get the money together for a helicopter to lift that thing out.
Yeah, it was quite a wait. Just hiking past the thing in the Badlands, just wondering.
Squishy toys.
I had the squishy toy over there, yeah. I used the squishy.
Favorite part of this. Yeah, so we're hopeful the skull is in there. It's figuring out pretty much as we expected, or at least the vertebrae are. It looks like the hips are blown apart, but the belly of this thing exploded. So,
Yeah, so they're asking about, did he have it jacketed? And it's like, not technically. You see little plaster patches here and there. You might see some left, right there. No, there's none left there. I showed you on the other side, you saw, and that was really to protect any bone that was already exposed, like cross sections in the block. The block itself was so strong, we just needed to strap it to a big steel frame and, have that lifted out.
this was the first of 4 Tyrannosaurs that we found that year. In fact, in the space of about a week and a half. Less than that. But it's kind of the last one that we're actually getting out. So the other 2 were almost done with 2 of the others. So, yep.
And Claire had asked, did we rebury it? And I said, no. We had it sitting on a pedestal and how many car jacks? Like
Yeah, there's
6
like
or 7 car
80,000
jacks.
pounds of car jack
Yeah.
capacity underneath it, so it was well propped up. I mean, these concretions sit out there for thousands of years. They just get harder. There were a couple of cracks. So there was a crack here across the base of the tail, and there was a crack through one of the leg bones at the bottom end.
Right.
So
You see
those
some
parts we could remove.
plaster on that crack there. There's going to be a cross section of a tail vertebra, caudal vertebra there. So yeah, that was plastered up to keep it safe. But main thing is we got it through the doors.
Yeah, we measured the doors and it should fit, but we were kind of wondering if we'd have to take part of the frame off. But it squeezed through with about 1 inch either side, so that was good.
Yeah.
It all worked. It was, don't mean to say surprising, but you always expect to have to fix something, and mostly we were fine. Other than the fact that I forgot to I didn't forget to turn the camera on, I just didn't know how to turn my camera on, so we didn't get a video of the thing being lifted up and brought down.
So a question I did get a lot that you're more adept to answer is, what exactly is this Tyrannosaur in terms of taxon and ontogeny?
We don't know yet what taxon it is. It's likely to be Daspletosaurus because that's what we have in this area. We've collected diagnostic remains of 3 or 4 taxa so far, and they've all been Daspletosaurus. 3 or 4 specimens so far, and they've all been Daspletosaurus. So this one is possibly or most likely to be a Daspletosaurus as well. Size-wise, it's probably about, I'll say 50% to 60% grown. It's nowhere near as big as the really big one that we got, B2, the holotype of Daspletosaurus wilsoni. We can compare some of the foot bones that we have, and it's not as big as that one, but it's bigger than it looks. The block, because it's all curled up, so it's bigger than it looks like it's going to be. Because it's kind of scrunched up and curled. So hopefully it'll have a head. Jim Liz painting the head of the.
Yeah, we could do that. Yeah.
Juicy or having that thing.
Let me take the chat. Okay.
Yeah, I'll do it.
We're going over to see Dr. Liz Friedman Fowler here,
Hello.
painting this skull.
Yeah, this is my fun treat for a long week at work.
Let me sit that down.
Yeah, it's a messy, gradual process, and you just kind of slap it on randomly, and eventually the randomness evens out. It looks quite orange when it's wet, and then this I've already done that orangey coat, so you can see it kind of fades out as it dries. So you have to keep in mind what color the paint is when wet, plus what color it is once it dries. So just adding a lot of texturing, and then I'll do a wash to kind of sink into all the lows. So there's one of the real bones. That's a rib head from the site for color reference. So.
Color reference there. And so this is the reconstruction of Sisyphus, right? B2.
Yep.
That's our big Daspletosaurus holotype, the holotype of Daspletosaurus wilsoni. And this is probably the best reconstruction of a Daspletosaurus skull
Yeah, it's
that's been made. Yeah, so this was 3D printed in our printer lab using resin printers.
Yeah.
And then Denver meticulously stitched it together with various glues and things. And soon it'll be out on display in the gallery.
And we have a second one that is for education, so that'll be going to like schools and stuff nearby. And we will eventually have miniature versions in the shop and stuff like that. I just have to get all that together. But at the moment, we're working with the full-size one. It's tough having to share an office with these things. It's pretty cool.
So is it softish, the resin? No, it cures pretty hard.
Yeah, it's hard stuff. It can be brittle. You wouldn't want to drop this on the floor, but it's pretty sturdy.
Yeah. That's just a few things going on right now. I'm taking this whole apparatus with me.
Like a Ghostbuster.
But could you bring my phone on your chair there? All right, thank you. All right, well, I didn't expect to wrap up things like this. I'm my own cameraman, streamer, preparator. Trying to play all the jobs right now. There we go. they're talking about some croc bones that Dion is working on. So anyway, I didn't expect it to blow up the way it did, but thank you everybody. I gotta be going home, so please follow so you can get the notification when I go live, because I do it randomly sometimes. And also remember, Natural History Studio, that's the YouTube channel. All of this gets re-uploaded, and you can find that all of that on my page here on Twitch. And also, like I talked about earlier, take a look at that throne so you can help support all the work we do at Badlands Dinosaur Museum. That's linked on my channel. See if you can pay for a couple hours of fossil prep, anything like that. We really appreciate it. Thanks for being here. Maybe I'll do stuff like this a little more. I really do appreciate it. And with that,